Hello, 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 everybody. Welcome, friends, family, community leaders, healthcare professionals, the people to combat COVID-19. I'm your host, Steve Canal, CMO of HBCU Change, where we're committed to developing innovative ways to raise $1 billion. Yes, $1 billion over the next 5 years for historically Black colleges and universities through our app and innovation. It is a roundup platform. So when you download the app, put it on your phone, connect the card, it rounds up to the nearest dollar after every transaction, and you get to choose which HBCU you'd like it to go to. So each donation goes directly to the HBCU of your choice through Change. And giving back has never been so easy. This is the third of a series of 8 candid COVID convos. Before I go any further, I'd like to personally thank Atlanta Medical Association, Community Organization Relief Effort, also known as CORE, the BLK+Cross, and the Gathering Spot for partnering with us and lending their platform to this important cause. Also, I definitely encourage you to go on to aliveandincolor.com, register to that platform to stay in touch. That's where you'll find out all the information for all the upcoming events, and definitely stay connected to that amazing organization. The purpose of tonight's conversation is to provide a trusted space for our community to engage experts for a better understanding of the realities of COVID-19 and its impact on communities of color. We all know the impact it's been having on people of color. So tonight we want to have a conversation and dialogue to bust some myths, spread some facts, and give you the information. Combat COVID will explore topics such as this tonight: optimizing your health and strengthening your immune system, which is very important, different ways to strengthen that immune system. The 3 W's of preventative behaviors, why flu shots are a must, and keeping our most vulnerable safe, the elderly and essential workers. Once again, welcome. We appreciate and value your time. Now let's introduce you guys to the amazing roundtable of panelists. Because tonight, definitely, take some notes, lock in, and later on we'll also be taking some questions and answering some of your questions. So let's welcome first Tory Wiley, CEO and founder of Lion of Judah Fitness Club. Tory Wiley has been a certified holistic personal trainer for 5 years. He is all-encompassing experience in the wellness field and has successfully operated his own fitness club for the past 4 years. Let's all welcome Mr. Tory Wiley. Tory, if you can, please share a little bit about what you've been doing and share some of that insight for everybody tonight.
Yeah, so first of all, thanks for having me on. This is going to be an amazing, conversation, and hopefully we continue to get good information to the people. Thanks to the Gathering Spot, especially. I'm a proud member, and thank you, Steve, for the nice introduction. Again, I am Uri. I also go by Tory. I'm the CEO and founder of LOJ Fit Club. We are a holistic health and fitness company where we take our communities from sick and disease to healthy and full of peace. Our 3 core principles on how we're continuing to being able to do that is the 3 M's, we call it, is meditation, mindfulness, getting our minds right, understanding your purpose, movement, understanding that exercise is not just working out, but a training platform of training your mind and body through functional exercise, and then main goals, which happens to be my favorite fruit, but really is in representation of plant-based nutrition, where we, dive deep into the importance of herbs and eating from the earth, which you come from. So, again, I'm thankful to be on, and I'm looking forward to the panel and all that it has to be able to share.
Awesome. Tory, thank you for that. Definitely looking forward to dive a little bit deeper into that plant-based nutrition. Let's welcome next transformation coach and best-selling author, Garrain Jones. Garrain's story is a perfect example of how you can go through so many difficult things in life, but that it doesn't mean you'll never find success. I like to say, a successful future doesn't require a successful past. And Garrain is definitely an example of that. 7.5 years after being homeless, Garrain is now a serial entrepreneur who motivates and inspires thousands across the country, across the globe, really. And he is an advocate for living a healthy life, business coach, speaker, and an author of an amazing book called Change Your Mindset, Change Your Life. So, Garrain, if you can touch a little bit on that and share a little bit more about yourself, if you can, please.
First and foremost, thank you, Steve, for that incredible introduction. And I acknowledge each and every one of the speakers on here for everything that you're going to share in the conversation that we're going to have. So pretty much, I use my life as a testimony, because you can't be what you can't see. And 9 years ago, I lived in my car for 2.5 years. I was an ex-convict, $200,000 in debt, and I tried to take my life twice. And I just didn't understand how you could continue to thrive and evolve in life. And I thought that you just had to live the life that you were handed. And then I came across a homeless guy, quote unquote, and he said, change your mindset, change your life. Those words hit me in a way where I just started thinking differently with the same circumstance. So it's been 9 years, and I've been doing the opposite of everything that I would normally do in areas of my life where I wasn't happy. And so I went from not having a relationship with my daughter or my mom or my family, being overweight, being $200,000 in debt, blaming everything, blaming my skin color, blaming the president, blaming everybody else. But the one person that I didn't take that I never blamed was myself. And then I learned how to take responsibility within myself. And then from there, I've developed an extremely powerful relationship with my daughter. I own several properties. I was able to retire my mom and then put her into things that she wanted to do. My mother, because she started seeing me live healthy and speak in a positive way, and she started seeing that example. My mother is no longer on a colostomy bag. My mother's down 97 pounds. She completely transformed her life. Now she's rock climbing and doing all kinds of things. And I'm supporting her and launching her eyewear line in 2021. And I say all that to say this: you can't change what you're not aware of. And I spent a lot of time preaching to people instead of being the most powerful representation of what freedom actually embodies. And so I'm grateful for the opportunity to speak from a place of personal transformation and personal experience. And I look forward to the conversation that we're having.
Absolutely. I'm a big advocate of that. I wrote a book called The Mind of a Winner, and it's really about the mind, having self-discipline. So, I applaud you for that, in your story and your testimony. Next, tremendous welcome, and thank you for being here, to our next guest, Dr. Rooke. Dr. Jennifer Rooke is an assistant professor in the Department of Community Health and Preventive Medicine at Morehouse School of Medicine. She is also the director of Employee Health Services in the Optimal Health Lifestyle Medicine Clinic at Morehouse Healthcare. She is also board certified in both preventative medicine and occupational and environmental medicine. Dr. Rooke, welcome, and please bless us all with some words. Yeah.
Okay, I'm muted now. Well, good night. I'm very excited to hear from the panelists because I'm inspired just hearing your stories. So I have a clinic at Morehouse. It's called the Optimal Health and Wellness Clinic. where we're practicing lifestyle medicine. Lifestyle medicine is an emerging medical specialty that's trying to address the underlying causes of disease. Yes, if you're sick, you probably need to be stabilized by taking medications, but eventually you want to become a healthier person. So the pillars of lifestyle medicine are nutrition. We focus on plant-based nutrition, physical activity, stress management, sleep management, emotional well-being, connectivity, and of course, avoiding substance abuse. And we have every Wednesday we have a lifestyle intervention program which is now on Zoom, and it's open to the public, and you're welcome to join, where we discuss those different aspects of how to become healthier.
That's awesome. I definitely like to make sure we share the link for that, or the information of where to register for that on Zoom, because I definitely would love to tap into the lifestyle intervention program and see all that you're sharing, so we can share with the group as well. Thank you. And then next we have an amazing guest. Last but not least, let's all welcome Jamila Ealey. Ealy earned her Bachelor of Science degree in biology from FAMU and a Master's of Public Health with a concentration in epidemiology from the University of South Florida. Her work focuses on improving systems of care, data representation, and coordination of effort among programs across Georgia to produce new HIV infections and eliminate the HIV/AIDS epidemic, reduce new HIV infections and eliminate the HIV/AIDS epidemic, which we all know the city of Atlanta is pretty big. So love the work that you're doing and appreciate the work that you're doing to reduce that. If you can, share a little bit more about yourself and the work that you've been doing.
Yes, thank you so much, Steve, for that introduction. And I am very fortunate and blessed to be on such a panel with such amazing guests. So I'm excited also to hear just the contributions and the amazing work. As you stated, my background is in public health. I have a passion in just really understanding the role that we play in health. Health is more than just about people getting sick and the choices that they make. And so my interest has always been in understanding numbers and how numbers can tell a more accurate story and depiction, specifically around health disparities in populations that are mainly impacted when we talk about these health disparities. So in working in HIV, COVID has a lot of similarities. And so I am interested in being able to help inform the community and help them to make better decisions based on the information that's available, so that they are more aware and using education, health literacy to improve overall health.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you. So let's get into it. Let's definitely dive into it. But before we jump into the fundamentals of how to combat COVID, let's do a quick recap of some of the facts around the state of this virus and its impact in our community. So fact number one, don't be fooled by the silent enemy at all. Fulton County continues to have high COVID infection rates. Up to 40% of people who have COVID-19 are estimated to be asymptomatic. That means they could be walking around like everything's cool because they don't have any symptoms, when in fact they're highly contagious. 40% of people who have COVID. As of September 2nd, 2020, which was a couple months ago, Fulton County is leading Georgia in county case rates at 25,152 cases of the 2019 novel coronavirus COVID-19. 30% of those cases have been asymptomatic. Again, you can have COVID and not have any symptoms and not show any signs of symptoms and be highly contagious. So it's very important to keep that in your mind as we go through this. Fact number two, being Black is a precondition. Black people are disproportionately impacted by COVID-19 and run a higher risk of getting infected. We all saw this all throughout the news, as this started to pick up, that people of color were disproportionately impacted by COVID-19. Black residents of Fulton County represent roughly 83% of the COVID-19 related deaths in Central and South Fulton County as of 10/23, which was, a couple weeks ago. As of a couple weeks ago, 83% of the COVID-19 related deaths were in Central and South Fulton County. 68% of COVID-19 deaths in Fulton County are Black. 68% of COVID-19 deaths in Fulton County. Man, to date, roughly 44,000 African Americans have died of COVID-19. And if they died at the same rate as their white counterparts, roughly 22,000 would still be alive. If you're Black with a precondition, example, HPV, diabetes, obesity, and you are hospitalized by COVID-19, you're almost 5 times more likely to be admitted to intensive care and require a ventilator. That's why it's so important, the conversation we're going to have today about diet. It's going to be very important because diet is a key cause for a lot of the conditions that we have. Studies have also shown that even African Americans with high incomes still have higher rates of COVID-19 than their white counterparts. So it seems that by all accounts, we're still in a state of red alert. Regardless of what you see in the news, what people might be saying, we are still in a state of red alert. So let's dive in and arm ourselves with this knowledge because it's very important. Our first topic is about optimizing your health and strengthening your immune system so that your body has the best odds possible at beating this virus. From what I've read, a recent study conducted by the BLK+Cross in Fulton County, researchers were surprised by the popularity of alternative preventative measures. For example, 89% of African American respondents believe eating healthy is a somewhat to very effective way to prevent COVID-19 infection. 45% of African American respondents believe yoga is a somewhat to very effective way to prevent COVID-19 infection. And 40% believe that herbal tonics can prevent you from COVID-19 infections. So let's get into it, Dr. Rooke.
The people who think that eating healthy is can improve can prevent severe infection and it boosts their immune system are right, 100% right, and the yoga also, because yoga helps to decrease stress. And the stress hormone is cortisol. Cortisol suppresses your immune system. So yoga and healthy eating are extremely important. I want to tell you a really quick story about healthy eating and how that prevented. It won't be very long. So I have a patient who is he has diabetes. It had all of those things. And he decided about a year ago that he was going to make dietary changes. He was going to change his eating habits and adopt a plant-based diet. And he has done remarkably well. Now, in March, he called me and said that, he was really not well. He thought, so I said, well, go to Wellstar. So he went to Wellstar and he, they tested him and sent him home. A few days later, well, about a week later, his wife got sick. And his wife is obese. She's one of these people who refuse to change her eating habits and just, something's going to kill you. And she was so sick. She was hospitalized in the ICU at Emory Midtown for 3 days. Now, that's only one story, but it's an important story because men are more likely to be hospitalized. Men are more likely to have more severe infections. And here it was a man who had changed his eating habits and had overcome a lot of health problems was actually the one who didn't get sick in the couple. So again, that does not mean that is, you need controlled trials, you need proper research, but that's one little story that makes you think that there is something about eating a healthier diet, primarily more of a whole food plant-based diet, that makes people, that boosts your immune system and helps you to survive the infection better.
So can you give us some recommendations on supplements or food that helps strengthen our immune system?
I am not a fan of supplements. I believe that you try to get all of your nutrients from food. And that is, I know that the only supplement that I recommend strongly is B12, because B12 comes from soil bacteria. And and you're not going to get, and it's like 40% of Americans who eat meat and who are doing everything that, you're told that's going to give you B12, they actually have a B12 deficiency. People who take metformin, people who are on different medications, it blocks B12 absorption. So B12 is the only supplement that I actually recommend. And the other supplements are like vitamin C. You can get, if you're eating a whole food plant-based diet, you will get all the vitamin C that you need. And we have a little handbook where we can show you, if you eat certain foods during the day, you will get something like 150% of the recommended amount of vitamin C. And you'll get all of your nutrients that you need from eating a healthy diet. And of course, going out in the sun for vitamin D. The best way to get vitamin D is via sunshine. And
so,
go ahead.
I'm sorry. So I had a question about that I'd love to ask, because we're living in unprecedented times right now, right? And people are experiencing things that they've never experienced before in life. When you think about, for 7 months, people have been locked down at home. Some people don't go out as much. Some people don't travel anymore. And the level of stress is at an all-time high. Can you just share a little bit about, how stress and stress management plays a role in keeping our immune system strong?
Yes. So earlier I referred to cortisol. Managing your stress through meditation, deep breathing. They teach guys in the military to breathe deeply when they're faced with traumatic situations, because breathing deeply, it fills your lungs up with oxygen and helps you to be calmer. So just a simple thing like breathing from your stomach, putting your hands on your stomach and having your stomach go out a deep breath is not, a deep breath is more having your stomach go out and filling your lungs up with air. And that actually, when your lungs are filled with air, your brain gets oxygen and you feel calmer. So simple things like that, of course, and there are, there's relaxation techniques, there's visualization. And I think the other people on the panel may be much better, may know more about the meditation, maybe actually practicing it. But we do have a meditation expert at Morehouse who comes and talks to us and actually does meditation sessions with us on just teaching us how to meditate. So meditation, those things are extremely important for being calm and decreasing your cortisol levels. And of course, decreasing your cortisol levels boost your immune system. And again, the diet, the whole food plant-based diet, I cannot recommend that highly enough. And again, try to get your supplements as best as you can from food, because supplements are not regulated in the United States. When you take a supplement, when you get a supplement, you're not sure what's in it. And you all can Google it. So they've done research. They go to the supermarket, they get the drugstore, the health food store, a range of supplements. So you will get, for middle is the one they did a lot of research on. So you can get 5 or 6 different brands, and you test them to see if they have what it is it says on the label. And most of them don't, because again, it's not regulated. That's why I strongly recommend that people try to get their nutrients from food, because you what's in it. And of course, we know that the soil, there's some of our food sources we have over time. The soil is not as rich as it used to be. So eat more. So if you eat more broccoli, you'll be getting the nutrients in broccoli. And I cannot stress enough the importance of making a habit of learning how to prepare fruits and vegetables. And we fruits for breakfast. Well, I actually, that is the recommendation, because you need servings of fruits a day at least, right? So that's what we recommend. And so if you start off the day for breakfast, if you're having 3 or 4 fruits, you're starting to get the nutrients. Now, fruits are full of phytonutrients that boost your immune system. And so that's, yeah. And the mangoes. Somebody said mangoes. I'm assuming mangoes are referring to all different fruits, right? So basically all the fruits and all the vegetables are healthy, and they promote good health. So I cannot stress enough the importance of doing this. CDC recommends 5 servings of fruits and vegetables. We're recommending 5 servings each, of 5 servings of fruit, 5 servings of vegetables at least. Okay, that's the minimum of what you should be eating every day.
Check. Make sure, duly noted, and definitely apply that to my day-to-day, along with my family. We love fruits and vegetables. And stress management, I love the insight that you gave on that as well. Tory, you've been a holistic personal trainer for 5 years. Tell us about what brought you to become a holistic personal trainer, and what is a holistic personal trainer?
Absolutely. Well, first, I just want to dovetail off of what Dr. Rooke was saying, and I really love that and have so much respect for you, because a lot of times with people who maybe Western trained doesn't necessarily go deeper into the route of the things that she's talking about. So, Dr. Rooke, I definitely want to connect with you. So please don't hang up before we connect, okay?
Okay.
So that's that. And to answer your question, Steve, so holistic personal training. Well, let's break down. Holistic just meaning all encompassing, okay, of the whole. Okay, normally when you see the word, you also see mind, body, spirit. Probably a couple months ago, before I changed these shirts, that's what it would say under. It would say mind, body, spirit under the LOJ Fit Club aspect of it. So holistic, and then trainer. Of course, we understand the connotations connected to that. So basically, the difference is that when you're dealing with exercise in the traditional sense in the Western world, you're dealing with a lot of times just only dealing with the physical body. When people come here, we're dealing with, again, the mind, the body, spirit approach that makes up their particular thing that they're coming for. So they might be thinking they just come here because they have a weight loss, a weight issue. But we are diving deep into figuring out, okay, what are some of the habits that may have led you to this point, and then how can we reverse engineer that to make sure not only do you lose the weight, but you sustain it, because now you became a different person. That's the holistic approach and holistic idea to what we do. In fact, listening to a podcast the other day, and Jillian Michaels, who's a great trainer, and she was under a lot of flack because a lot of the people who were on The Biggest Loser, a lot of them gained the weight back and go even further. And so what she was saying was correct, which was, because, she can give you what to do all day long and it works. But if we didn't address that core issue that's creating your reality with what you're attracting to you, then it doesn't really help you in the long run. And so that's what I'm about. That's what we're about, here at LOJ Fit Club. And
absolutely.
So,
and can you touch a little bit on why it's important for Black people and communities of color in particular to be more involved with holistic training?
Yes, absolutely. The first thing I want to say about that is that, well, number one, this is our roots and this is our culture. We brought this to the forefront of the world. So a lot of times when we start to get into this, we may think that, something like yoga or meditation or something that we're trying to, emulate from other cultures. But in reality, this all started with us. The continent of Africa has always dealt with preventative and traditional ways of healing. So number one is because it's us. And so it gives you a form of identity of what it is that we're about and where it is that how we've sustained up until this point. You got to remember, Western medicine and Western way of thinking is a very new concept. And if it's all so superior, how did we make it to this point to even get to that to this particular threshold in time in dealing with things? So the reason why it's important is because, again, it is our culture. But then secondly, the reason why it's important is because it's not fictitious. It works. Okay, it works. And so that's why we should be definitely doing it in the state. If you're looking at, the state of where we are and the detriments that come along with the destructive culture that we picked up by being, in this particular land and being stripped of our culture, then, I mean, it's either that or we continue to down the same road. And nobody want to see, our family suffering, and, you're always having to go to a funeral, et cetera, of somebody who's dying prematurely based upon lifestyle diseases. So if it's lifestyle diseases, we need to find a way to access, proper health to be able to reverse those things. So this is why you should be looking to, connect with people.
So last point I'd like to touch on and question, given, the times that we're in right now, a lot of people are facing hardship and have to make tough decisions, right? So there are a lot of things that they have to cut out of their life. Some of it might have been that gym membership. There are a lot of recurring payments that were coming out, and those are some of the first to go. So could you share some recommendations or resources that our viewers could tap into to try and stay in shape during the lockdown? Because we're facing a second wave right now. So it's going to be more people that aren't going to want to go outside. So what are some things that they can tap into, whether it's virtual courses or, anything that you can share to our audience?
Yep. So along with those things that you're cutting out, if you're going to cut out the gym membership and other things like that, another thing that I recommend cutting out is a lot of what mainstream media is sharing as well. That's another thing to cut out to add to that list. But to follow that, yes. So the thing about it is that the body is a machine in itself. The body is magnificent. You don't need a gym. A gym, a lot of times, most of the people that even come and train with me on a one-on-one basis and train with us actually have had gym memberships and didn't really even know what to do. How many times have you walked in the gym and seen all that fancy equipment and you're like, what in the world am I supposed to be doing with this? So you just end up wasting a lot of money. And because they make it low enough that you kind of just keep telling yourself that you're going to eventually use it, and then 3 years later they got you for $500, $600, $800,000. Okay, that's the model. So once you understand that your body is a machine and that nature is all the gym that you need, then from that mindset, can go out the window. And then understanding that if you don't have money for a trainer, cool. To my knowledge, we have YouTube University that can show you every single way to work out, that you can never imagine. So all of those are crutches. And a lot of times that when we don't want to necessarily do the thing that we got to do, we use those things as an excuse of why we don't do it. So for the people who do, you go seek that help. For the people who don't, go to YouTube. Go start going outside in nature and start right there in your living room. It's not that hard. So I've seen many of people who've seen an 80-year-old lady who transformed her life in like 10 months from walking in her living room. I mean, it was crazy, right? So, things like that exist. So our body's a machine. Keep that in mind. We don't need anything outside of that.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing that. Garrain, man, you're an inspirational story, brother. And I'd really like for you to share with everybody viewing right now, because I really want them to hear at least, the clip notes or the high level version of how you arrived at becoming a transformational coach.
So I'll give you some quick bullet points. My father was murdered when I was 12 years old. And I just had to figure that out as a little kid. My brother pretty much disowned me. Didn't have a relationship with my mom or anybody in my family. So I felt like I was alone and trying to fit in. And then being light skinned with kinky hair, I was like, well, I don't have the soft curly hair so I just didn't feel like I belonged anywhere. And so just going through that whole life and trying to just navigate life, the only people who really took me in were the people who got in trouble all the time. So that's how I was going in and out of jail, in and out of juvenile, and all of that stuff. But in hindsight, when I pull and zoom all the way back from going into prison overseas for 2.5 years, living in my car for 2.5 years, sleeping in an abandoned building in a storage, sleeping on bubble wrap, when I pull it all the way back, I was mismanaging my energy. The energy can't be created nor destroyed. It can only be transferred. So I was successful at talking bad about myself. And I was successful at having a negative mentality. I was successful at continuing, I'm a Southern boy, so I was fatty fried, Salisbury steak, bacon, double cheeseburger. I didn't know any better. And then, like I said before, you can't change what you're not aware of. So I just continue the pattern. That pattern is just like a form of language. If I gave you a book on Japanese right now, you ain't gonna just speak it right away. You would literally have to immerse yourself in that culture or in that language, and so that you can override the way that you've been thinking your whole life. So for me to then reverse engineer that, forgive the 2 men who murdered my father, write a list of 250 names, and let go of resentment of the person who molested me when I was 13, and all these people that either did something to me or I did something to them, to literally reverse engineer my entire life and create a new story of how I wanted to look, but from the point of the 5-year-old seeing a new story, but not trying to recreate the story from the surface, because that's how it just keeps coming back. You try to cut the weed at the top, it's gonna keep growing back. You gotta pull it from the root. So that's why I really admire what Tory was saying, all of that root work that you're doing. So because I decided to go where most people don't go, which is that dark place in my life, and do it over and over and over and over, I started learning a new language called evolution, and the essence of life is growth. So when you understand the process of how growth or transformation or breakthroughs take place, all I did was cut out all the stuff that didn't belong in my life in the first place, but they all taught me a valuable lesson, which was how to remember who I am at the core. I was born into love. So all the lessons and the philosophies that I learned while navigating my own life, I was like, man, somebody needs to hear this. So the first message that I had when I was vulnerable on social media and says, you know what, you think you know me? You have no idea. I'm overweight. I don't like myself. I don't have no relationship with my daughter, my family, anything. But in 5 years, I'm going to be a multi-millionaire. I'm going to retire my mom. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do every single thing that I said I was going to do happened 10 times over. And then when somebody saw that post, they said, man, when I read your post, I put the gun down. When I read the post, I didn't drive my car off a bridge. And I realized by me being vulnerable and not having this preconceived ego that men are supposed to be, when I really let that go, I realized all the strength was in the power of my vulnerability. And when I did that, I was like, I know exactly why God put me through all of this stuff. It's so that I could be the voice of the voiceless. And that's how transformation came about. I go and talk to the places where most people don't want to hear anybody else, because people listen to who they can relate to. And I've lived like 20 lives. And so transformation came about, whether it's health, whether it's money, whether it's business, whether it's getting your relationship back with your daughter or your family or anything like that. All of that plays a significant piece, even inside of this COVID thing, because we're talking about health from the eating standpoint, but most people emotionally eat. So the conversation before that is, how do you feel about yourself when nobody is around and you look in that mirror and the truth shows up? Because the outside is the physical manifestation of what's going on inside the brain that's connected to the heart. So this whole transformation conversation is honestly a reflection of how you see yourself. And however you see yourself, whatever thoughts you give the most power to, it's going to keep showing up as the physical equivalent in your life, over and over and over and over and over.
You know what, man? Hearing your story and going through homelessness, going through prison, how did keeping a positive mindset factor into your experience, or did it? Because we talk about the impact of the mind and how the mind is what allows you and assists you to transition and move forward. you know, were there points where you had, you know, a positive mindset of getting through what you were going through to get to where you are today?
There was all through my life, but like I said before, you can't change what you're not aware of. So I didn't even know that the way in which I was thinking and treating myself deep down on the inside was eventually causing certain things to happen in my life. I'm going to share you a quick story. I was a little kid and I wanted to play hooky from school. And I remember saying, Mom, I'm sick. I wasn't sick. And I just kept saying, Mom, I'm sick. Mom, I'm sick. Mom, I'm sick. Baby, are you okay? Mom, I'm sick. By the end of the day, I had 102 fever and I was throwing up. Beginning of the day, I didn't. So if that can happen in one day of me saying and thinking I'm sick and embodying that frequency of being sick, if that can happen in one day, now imagine somebody's life living like that 30, 40 years, 50 years.
Yeah.
So the positive mindset, a lady named Shannon Davison gave me a book, which I thought was the stupidest gift when I was 18 years old. I was in special needs classes. I had a speaking impediment, and I'm a global speaker right now. So that'll tell you right now, whatever's going on in your brain, you can re-engineer that. She gave me a book called The Power of Positive Thinking by Norman Vincent Peale. Mm-hmm. I wanted to read that book just so that I can work on the enunciation and over-enunciate these words, because I hated talking with a lisp and having the speaking impediment and listening to what the doctors were telling me what was wrong with me. So as I was reading that book called The Power of Positive Thinking, I didn't know that what I was reading was actually causing things to happen in my life, because life's not happening to you, it's responding to you. Since then, I read that book maybe 382 times between the paperback and audiobook, over and over and over and over and over. So when people say, man, you're the most positive person, all these great things happen, I'm like, well, what I put into my head is causing me to think a certain way, which is causing me to act a certain way, which is causing my actions to occur a certain way, which is causing people to feed from that same frequency, that same energy. And whatever that is drawing the money, is drawing the businesses, is drawing the opportunity. So I'm not reflecting because of a negative attitude. I'm actually attracting because of the positive attitude that first starts with myself.
Thanks. I'd like to take this moment to ask the panel to build on the idea of mind and body, because we've been talking about it, you know, throughout this whole time, how the mind can impact the body and the body impact the mind. That connection, how do the two relate? Dr. Rooke, I'd love for you to chime in on that, on the relation between the mind and body.
Yeah, I think I can do the body pretty well. The guys are pretty good on the mind. So I can tell you that you need hydration. Really, make sure you're getting at least half of your body weight in fluid ounces of water. Make sure you're well hydrated. Make sure you're getting lots of physical activity. Make sure you're sleeping. You know, in addition to a whole food plant-based diet, these are the things that make you healthy. So good sleep. I try to get at least 7 hours. I know in our society, very few people are getting that. But if you can time yourself and try to go to bed at the same time every night, even though I'm saying that I think we are all struggling, right? So with so much to do, we're struggling. But when I do sleep, I feel so much better. I can say that. So sleep, again, we talked about stress management, sleep, and see how what we're doing now is so important. Connecting to others and being a part of a community, that is extremely important. It's almost as important as what you're eating and the other things you're doing and physical activity. So these are the things that help to make your body stronger. So I'll let the guys talk about the mind, but of course, meditation and those things are important too. Yeah.
And Dr. Rooke, before I move on to that, you've mentioned sleep a couple times, and we're living in a time right now where everybody's in hustle mode, and they feel like I only need 4 hours of sleep because I gotta hustle, work nonstop, and they're going off of 4 hours of sleep. just, if you can, just touch on that again, the importance of getting the sleep and the impact it has on your body. And then that translates to the mind. And, you know, everybody, you know, we could all talk about that, but if you can, just touch on that little piece if you can.
Sleep is so important for everything. It's your memory. We were talking about that last night. Well, we wanted to talk about that last night, but so sleep improves your memory. It improves your function, improves your, you can look at somebody and tell they haven't slept because they look tired, they look haggard, your immune system. So getting back to COVID, and sleep is extremely important for making sure your immune system functions properly. All the natural killer cells, you can tell people who don't sleep, you have these cells that zoom around your bloodstream, actually trying to kill cancer, right? It's like they zap. So when you don't sleep, those cells, they're not as active, and they're not as functional. So, and your whole immune system functions better when you've slept. So sleep is important, and of course food, but sleep. I hope I did the sleep, because there's studies which show that when you change from daylight savings time, when you gain an hour of sleep, you can see improvements. When you lose an hour of sleep, there are more traffic accidents, there are more heart attacks, there are more things that you wouldn't even think that they're associated with sleep, but you can see the difference. With losing or gaining an hour of sleep, you can tell the difference. So as best as you can, there are some really excellent videos. I don't know if I'll have time to tell you how to get sleep, but try to get a cool room. Try to make your room as like a cave, as cave-like as you can, lowering the temperature, making it dark, no distractions. If you do these things, you will be encouraging sleep. And of course, don't do anything in your bed, because the things you do in your bed, you associate those things with your bed. The only thing you should be doing in bed is sleep and sex, but sleep mostly, because that's what's rejuvenating, right? That's what we're talking about.
Absolutely.
Is that helpful?
Does anybody want to touch on the mind part?
I will, but just because we haven't heard from Jamila,
no.
Jamila want to touch on that.
No, I got a whole lot for Jamila. I'm letting her save those vocal cords, because I got a whole lot for her to coming up next.
Awesome. So, Garrain, if you want to go, and then I'll follow up after you.
You know, there's a thing that I do every single morning called the Power Hour, and you know, I took this from it's called the 5 a.m. Club with Robin Sharma. It's a 20-20-20 formula. Take 20 minutes of moving your body first thing in the morning. See, I wake up at 5 a.m. Well, actually 4:50 a.m., but I get 7 to 8 hours of sleep every single night. And I'll wake up, and the very first thing that I do is I move my body. Because see, your cortisol levels are as highest when you're most tired and when you first wake up in the morning. You know, when you wake up in the morning and you got that, whatever that pressure is. So to combat that pressure, when you actually start moving your body, soon as I wake up, I actually start doing push-ups, not for my workout, but just to sharpen to push past that resistance level, which also increases your focus. So I do 20 minutes of intense exercise, whatever you need to do to move your body, and that raises your serotonin levels, which is the molecule in your body that causes you to be happy, and it lowers your cortisol levels. Boom. And then 20 minutes after that, there's 20 minutes of like affirmations or writing in a journal or whatever it is you're planning your day, or if you had an issue yesterday, you're working through something, just pen the pad or looking in the mirror and saying, I'm powerful, I am beautiful, I am amazing, I am successful in every area of my life, whatever that is, for 20 straight minutes. And then right after that, 20 minutes of learning one new thing. One new thing, not 50. What you want to do to create a habit is to create the pathway to the least resistance. So learn one new thing. So if you're working on a project or something, literally learn one new thing in that project. If you're working on a movie script or something, whatever it is, learn one new thing. So I'm either reading or listening to something. So it's the 20-20-20 formula. You do 30 days of something where you're activating your mind, body, and soul, and it's intentional. It's not accidental, because you don't have an accidental life. When you're intentional with your energy, you're going to start to notice way better sleep, way better sex life, way better energy. You won't have crashes during the middle of the day. Your focus level will be crazy. Your grit level will be crazy in such a great way. So that's something that I apply, and it's simple, but you want to automate it. They say it's 20 days to build a habit. Do it for 66 straight days and watch what happens to your life along the way.
Awesome. Can you repeat that? So can I ask a question? So it's 20 minutes of exercise.
20 minutes of that. But as soon as you wake up and as soon as your feet touch the ground, it's not the 5-minute lag. As soon as you wake up, boom, it's right into it. 20 minutes of intense exercise, 20 minutes of self-reflection, and then 20 minutes of growing your mind, so learning one new thing.
Oh, thank you.
You're welcome.
I will pass that on and use it myself.
Thanks for sharing that. Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
I wanted to chime in on that conversation. I'm gonna keep it brief. I don't want to necessarily go the route of what Garrain was just saying, because he covered it. I mean, everything he just said was exactly on the physical level of exactly how to be able to get your mind right. So that's perfection. But I do want to bring up a point of this. We have to understand that the mind is the spiritual component to the brain. The brain is the physical matter. The mind is the intelligence that comes from your spirit. Two different things. This is why you can close your eyes and envision something happening without it actually happening, because that's the mind. The brain can only go from what's in the physical realm. Okay? So in understanding that, this is why, biblically speaking, looking at the Bible from a spiritual perspective, not necessarily a religious perspective, changing that lens, it says what? It says that man doesn't live off bread alone. Well, if we understand that man doesn't live off bread alone, right, then we understand that man doesn't die off bread alone. So the mind, feeding the mind, is more important than actually feeding the body. So the music you listening to, and sometimes it can be counterproductive. You eating a plant-based diet, but you listening to, Chicago drill rap, and they talking about, murdering your mama and tying up your sister. That's negative energy in the mind. Okay? So that's a frequency to that. So the mind of what you're feeding it, from what the TV shows that you're watching. The other day I was watching Netflix TV show, and in the introduction, I like the TV show because I'm learning the psychology of some things that, some interesting things out there. But in the introduction, it was like flashes to like dead bodies, or like little subtle stuff like that. And I just turned my head. I wouldn't allow that to enter into my mind, because that's creating, the subconscious picks up all these things. So before you engage into anything, media, social media, who you following, what they're talking about, your girlfriend who always talking about, her bad situation, you have to be very, very, very careful on what you allow to enter into that great thing called the mind. It is the spirit that gives life, and the flesh profit is nothing. So we got to be able to keep that in mind, and to be able to apply those spiritual principles, so that way we can feed the mind, and the body will, by default, the body will be able to benefit from.
I agree.
Thank you for sharing that. And I'd like our viewers to also know that you're not alone in this. Fulton County offers both nutritional and counseling, as well as mental and behavioral telehealth services on a sliding scale. So now if you need a little help, you can do it, from the comforts of and safety of your own home. And, you'll be getting the link to this as well, if you'd like to tap into those services, from the mental and behavioral health services and nutritional counseling, which we'll be sharing those links with you as well. At this moment, I'd like to pause for a second. If anybody in the audience has any questions, please feel free to drop drop a line, and we'll get to answering some of those questions as well. If not, we can move on to the next section. I think, this is flowing very nice, so I don't want to stop the energy right now. But if any questions come in, we'll definitely hop in, because this next section I definitely want to tap into with Miss Ealey, which is very important, which is COVID-19 and the 3 W's of prevention. So we've talked a bit about the practice of health living as a way to combat COVID-19 infections. We talked about, eating right. We talked about, getting enough sleep and rest. We talked about just the mental clarity that you need to, face what we're going through right now and how it'll impact your day to day. Now let's get into the nitty gritty of prevention, or risk mitigation, as doctors call it. We'll start with transmission, or how this virus is actually spread. Miss Ealey, we've heard a lot of theories about the origins of coronavirus, and now it's spread from one person to another. Do you mind sharing with our viewers in the panel what experts know so far about coronavirus? Because we're still learning, and how it spread from one person to another.
Sure. So as you mentioned, there's a lot about coronavirus or COVID-19 that we're still learning. What we do know is that in regards of it being a respiratory illness, that is the one area where it's similar to the flu. With it being a respiratory illness, it is spread from person to person through respiratory droplets. These droplets are generated from either your throat or your nose, and it's spread when an infected person coughs, sneezes, breathes, talks, or even sings. Essentially what happens is these droplets become present in the air or in the environment. And once they're there, especially if you're in areas where there's not a lot of ventilation or circulation, they become densely populated. And so if you are exposed, you can easily inhale those droplets and become infected. COVID is also present on surfaces. So if you touch a tablet, a doorknob that hasn't been sanitized or cleaned, you can touch that, end up touching your mouth, your nose, or even your eyes, and you can also become infected that way. It's known that COVID doesn't last very long on surfaces, but if that surface isn't cleaned, you can become contaminated. One of the things you mentioned earlier was about people being asymptomatic. The reason it's important for us to understand asymptomatic, and I'll also talk a little bit about pre-symptomatic, is because being in that state is where we see most cases of people spreading the disease, but spreading it unknowingly. So as you mentioned before, asymptomatic is a person who feeling perfectly fine, but they are infected and they can easily spread the virus to someone else. We also have a state called pre-symptomatic. This is when someone is infected, but they don't quite know that they're infected or they have not yet started developing symptoms. It usually happens between the first 1 to 5 days. And it's that first kind of window where people are most infectious. So it's important to understand that, and we'll talk a little later about the importance of testing, because you could be feeling perfectly fine, but also be the most contagious.
Yeah. And, you move around and you see a lot of people not wearing masks, and you hear these facts. And I heard a data point yesterday that said that COVID can actually live in the air for up to an hour. And by simply just wearing a mask, you can prevent from, contracting, or getting, the virus, and how it can live on a surface. So I'd love for you to just touch a little bit on just the importance of just the basics of just wearing a mask.
Sure. So wearing a mask has actually been found to be the most effective preventative method that we have. A person wearing a mask, you can reduce your risk of contracting COVID by upwards of 65 to 70%. So you mentioned before about the 3 W's. I'll talk a little bit about that, but just in terms of wearing a mask, I'll give you an example. Some of the data shows this. If a person is COVID positive and they're not wearing a mask, but there's a person who is healthy, the probability of transmitting the virus is as high as 70%. If that person is COVID positive and wears a mask and a healthy person is not wearing a mask, that reduces down to as low as 5%. And if both a COVID positive person and a healthy person are wearing a mask, that drops even lower to as low as about 1.5 to 2% risk of transmission. So that tells you a little bit about the importance of wearing a mask as a barrier to really preventing you from inhaling those droplets that, of course, could potentially be infectious.
So we also hear the term community spread a lot. What does that mean, and how should we be thinking about community spread in the context of prevention? Because everybody's ready to go outside. Everybody's like, hey, I can go to these these drive-in, shows. I can go to a restaurant and just be 6 feet apart. Talk a little bit about what exactly community spread means.
Sure. So community spread is when you have an illness that is spreading throughout the community, but the source of the infection is unknown. So that can be a little scary, because that means you might be out here willy-nilly, but you don't know that something is actually happening. We have this virus, we have something that's present. So an example is someone who found out that they're COVID positive, but they have no knowledge that they even came in contact with someone who was COVID positive. And so because of this, it's important that we do things and that we're taking the necessary steps. And so from a public health standpoint, what are we doing to kind of address community spread? So there are two things. One is what we call contact tracing, and the other is COVID testing. Contact tracing, while it's a slightly new term, has been around infectious disease for a very long time. We see it very common in other infectious diseases such as tuberculosis and/or STD. The point of contact tracing is really to narrow down a person who is infected and identify where they may have been exposed and who they may have been exposed to. So it's really trying to identify who may be positive, where they may have been, what they may have been doing, and identify them and work to get them tested with the intent to prevent further transmission of the virus. And so we hear sometimes people talk about contact tracing because it requires someone usually to contact them and ask them a series of questions. People are a little apprehensive because it's like, well, what do you need this information for? What are you trying to do it? What are you trying to do with it, right? But it's strictly for the purposes of public health. If we can identify someone who has been exposed to the virus, then we can act in a quick manner to ensure that they're tested. If you know that you are positive, you can then begin taking the necessary steps to isolate yourself, quarantine yourself, and not in turn infect other people, whether it's intentional or not, because you know or you don't know. We heard the term super spreaders for a lot when we with this recent election. The purpose of contact tracing really can help to alleviate some of that, because we identify people who are positive because they've recently been exposed. And it also allows us to identify someone in a timely enough manner so they can get into care before their symptoms may become more severe.
Awesome. Given what we've learned about transmission, what are the most effective ways to prevent COVID-19 infection?
So that's a really good question. The one thing I would say is anyone can get COVID-19. And in light of some of the conversations we've had earlier, there's no one short way to ensure zero risk, unless you're just in the house and you absolutely go nowhere. And we just, heard that it's not important, it's not good to just be in the house and doing nothing. You have to be able to practice and do the things that you need to do, but it's important to do it in a smart way, and important to make sure that you're aware of what you need to do so that you are as safe as humanly possible. So I'll talk a little bit about what those steps look like. And that includes really trying to avoid what we call the 3 C's and practicing the 3 W's. So I'll talk a little bit about the 3 C's. The 3 C's include avoiding crowded places, right? So we want to avoid places where you have gatherings of 10 or more people. We talked about the presence of aerosols in the air. If you're in crowded spaces, it's much more likely for you to encounter those infected aerosols and or touch a space that hasn't been cleaned and end up touching your face or somewhere else where you can easily get infected. The third one is close contact. So avoiding close contact or close contact settings. Once again, you want to make sure that you have enough space between yourself and someone else who may be infected. And then the third one is really trying to make sure that you are not in confined or enclosed spaces. You want somewhere where it has a lot of ventilation and or open space so that you can reduce the likelihood that you have high concentrations of areas where you have infections or infectious droplets. So then I'll go into the 3 W's that you want to make sure that you're practicing. So the first is making sure that you are wearing your mask. And so wearing your mask correctly as well as consistently is important and is key. As we mentioned, it is the most effective strategy right now, being that we don't have treatment, we do not have a cure, and we do not currently have a vaccine for COVID. So wearing a mask is the most effective means of really protecting yourself and preventing the spread. Secondly is washing your hands. And when we talk about washing your hands, it should be often and thoroughly. So none of that just kind of washing here. We want to make sure that it's thorough. So you're getting both the front and back, and you're washing for us at least 20 seconds with soap and water. And we know you may be out and about and you may not have access to that. And so when you're not when you cannot easily access soap and water, making sure that you're using a hand sanitizer. And that sanitizer should have alcohol percentage of at least 60%. And then the last W is waiting. And that's waiting at least 6 feet from someone whose status you do not know. Again, because anybody could have COVID, unless you actually know that they are COVID negative, assume that they're not. If that person does not have on a mask, you want to make sure that that distance is even more. You know, we hear about the give me 50 feet rule. You may want to go ahead and implement that if a person is not wearing a mask and you don't know what their status is. So those are certainly steps that you can take individually to make sure that you are protecting yourself as best possible.
If you can briefly, because there are different masks that people wear. There are different forms. You have the gaiters. You know, can you talk a little bit about which mask we should just be one and done and throw away, and which mask we can actually wash and actually reuse?
That's a great question. So your disposable mask or your cotton mask are certainly one and done. You know, once you use those, you want to make sure you get rid of it. The rule of thumb is to have at least 2 masks that are cloth masks that you don't have to get rid of if you don't have disposable masks. And each time you go out, meaning for that day, you want to make sure that you have a new mask on. One of the things we kind of talk about is just making sure when you do have a mask that you are wearing it correctly, what we talked about before. So whether it's a cloth mask and or a disposable mask, it's important that you are covering both your nose as well as your mouth. We have some of those exposed noses out there, and trust and believe that is not protection because you have nothing that's blocking your nose from possibly inhaling droplets. So you want to make sure that that mask fits securely and comfortably over your nose where you can still breathe so you're not having to move around and take it off and put it back on. When you're removing your mask, whether it's a disposable mask or a cloth mask, you want to be mindful of not touching it, especially if your hands are not clean. So you want to make sure that you're taking it off properly and be mindful of where it is that you're placing it. Again, we talked about the fact that COVID is present on surfaces. So if you drop it on the ground and or you put it on a surface that is contaminated, you can put that back on, and in turn, it defeats the purpose, right? Because you can be exposing yourself to COVID. So one of the things I just wanted to mention as well, because you talk about cloth masks, is that there's still a lot of research that's being done to determine kind of what the best mix of, say, material that is available in terms of blocking and filtering out those infected aerosols. But what studies have certainly found is that any mask, whether cotton or disposable, is sufficient enough for your average general population, average person to wear to help as a means of prevention. You know, unless you're working in healthcare or a place where you're going to be exposed to people who have COVID at a greater percentage, a cloth mask and or a disposable mask is sufficient.
Awesome. Thank you for that. And if you can, you know, I've read that some of the best ways to actually wash is with warm water and soap or a washing machine. Is that true?
That is correct. So again, if it's not disposable, but it's a mask that is something that you can wash. If it has a filter, some masks have filters that can be removed. You want to make sure that you remove that filter and either replace it and or you just get a new mask. But in the interim, yes, you can certainly wash, and you should be washing by hand with soap and or water or in the washing machine.
Awesome. So before we go on to the next section, I want to ask you something that you said, and I'm going to read a quote that you have that says, COVID-19 is a novel virus that can best be combated using prevention and education strategies that have been effective in targeting known communicable diseases. Re-strategize coordination and comprehensive public health approach. Can you tell us what you meant by re-strategize coordination and how that plays a role in combating COVID?
Absolutely. Essentially, it's don't reinvent the wheel if you don't have to. Public health, we've been working in fighting infectious disease for a long time, and there have been methods that we have found to be effective. We found methods that have been found to be revamped or that can be revised. And so when it comes to COVID-19, it's important that we identify key activities that we know can be effective. And one of those is education, making sure people are well informed on what it is that they need to do to protect themselves. Health literacy is a very key component of that. And so we have to make sure, one, that we have messaging that is consistent and that we have messaging that people can relate to. people need to understand, how does this apply to me? Because if it doesn't speak to me, then I don't understand why it's important to me, and I'm not going to take the necessary steps to protect myself. With COVID-19, it is very much a disease, a virus rather, that depends on a person taking the necessary steps that they need to as individuals. Wearing a mask not only protects the other person, but it also protects yourself. And so we have to make sure that we have messaging that is on target, but messaging that is also tailored to communities that we see are most impacted and most affected. So we talked about knowing that certain communities of color, Black and other communities of color, are most impacted. So ensuring that we have messaging that is relatable and that's understandable when it comes to those communities. Also looking at things such as being innovative in our thought process. So I've talked a little bit about COVID tracing. How can we potentially use technology to improve that process? One of the big things, as we're seeing an increase in numbers now, is trying to figure out where we see hotspots, right? So if we have technology that can help track where people go for dating apps, then how can we use that to help identify where people may have been exposed to COVID in larger numbers? So trying to be innovative in our thought process. And also when I talk about coordination is really how can we be more collaborative in our approach? And that's from various sectors. And so that's making sure that the federal government is working with your state government, with your local government and your local communities, so that the activities are really tied to being the most effective based on what the people need, so that they too can play a role in their overall health.
Awesome. Thank you for that. That was definitely some impactful knowledge that you just shared with us. Really grateful for that information. And I'll take this time right now again to pause. And if there are any questions that the audience may have, please feel free to shoot us those questions so we can answer those. We have about 20 minutes left, so I want to make sure that we do get some questions in. But since we're flowing, I want to get into a touchy topic right now, which is getting a flu shot. There's some people who won't touch the flu shot, and there's those who get it every year. And I want to, take some time for us to have a little nice conversation about that. And Dr. Rooke, I want to come back to you now because the second wave is upon us and it's flu season, right? And from what I understand, getting a flu shot is critical this year because of the combination of COVID being out there and the flu during the season. So I want to ask you, Dr. Rooke, why is it important for us to get flu shots as part of our COVID-19 risk mitigation?
Well, because both COVID and influenza are they affect the upper respiratory tract, and getting a double infection may not be a good idea. So if you can prevent one of them, then you should definitely do that. On a regular basis, people die every year. We have a range of 12,000 to 60,000 people who die every year from influenza, with a sort of average around 36,000 people. We don't think that the cold, we think of it as the cold, but we don't think that influenza is that serious, but it can kill you. It primarily kills the very young and the very old. So, and people who are immunocompromised. So it is a good idea to get a flu shot because, again, if you can prevent one of the two infections, you're ahead of the game.
So you said something that I think might have went over people's heads, and I want to touch on this. Mm-hmm. You were saying if you can prevent one, it's probably the best route to go. So are you saying that you can actually get the flu and COVID at the same time?
Yes, they're two completely different viruses. So yes, you can get you can have influenza and also get the flu. And also getting contract COVID, a COVID infection. And so you don't want to do that. Believe me, you don't. I did not become infected, but from the stories of people who have become infected with COVID, it is not a pleasant experience. There is just chronic, terrible fatigue. And of course, when you've had the flu, if you had a bad case of the flu, it's also just a it can be quite devastating, and of course it can kill some people. So I would strongly recommend that you try to prevent one of those. Since we cannot prevent COVID, we can prevent COVID by doing some of the things we said earlier to boost our immune systems, but we don't know. I think we just found out that so many people are asymptomatic. So they may be carrying COVID, you may be standing next to them, and you go out many times, people aren't wearing masks, so you're wearing yours, but you're not 100% protected. So it's better to take every precaution to prevent COVID and take a flu shot, so that you're preventing, you're preventing another infection that could make it worse if you were to become infected with the coronavirus.
Got it. So pretty much everyone needs to get that flu shot. But the good news is that Fulton County Board of Health has partnered with CORE to bring free flu vaccinations to our most vulnerable communities. And they are offered on a sliding scale basis at 5 Fulton County health clinics. We're going to drop the link, but visit the CORE website to see where and when free flu vaccinations are coming to a community near you, or visit Fulton County Board of Health immunization website for more information on where to get a flu shot. And we will share those links with you as well. So coming back around.
Another point of getting the flu is that, again, people end up in hospital with the flu. So if there be fewer people to be in the hospital if you have a surge of COVID cases, if you don't also have people with the flu in the hospital, you have more beds, more ability to care for people with the coronavirus infection.
Yeah, because our hospitals are getting stressed right now, and they're coming up with the tough decisions on who should be cared for, which is never a good position we need to be in. And you have some states who are facing high increases of COVID cases, similar to what New York was going through earlier in the year. So a lot of those hospitals are getting stressed. So, the main point of this today is to talk about preventative measures to keep us from stressing our system and putting ourselves in a better position to combat and be able to, live our lives through this pandemic. So these are very important, tools and information that's being shared today. So I'm really thankful for all that, you all have taken the time to share with us today. But coming back to Tory and Garrain, is there anything else we should know about keeping our immune system in top, shape to combat COVID and the flu?
So yeah. Well, one of the things is also just, for anybody who may want to look at this from an alternative point of view, I'm not in favor of vaccines. Okay, especially what we have on the market today. And the only people that I know, the people that come into that come, to get help from us, the only people I know that pretty much catch the flu are the people who, get vaccinated, not the ones who don't. It's also, in their own rhetoric and their own knowledge is that it's also understood that people, in getting a vaccination, it's not a silver spoon saying that you're going to prevent that. It's not guaranteed that. But I do want to challenge everybody to make sure that you understand and know what's in, vaccination. You can go to the CDC website. It's a printout right here. You can go to the CDC website. I think a lot of people will be a lot of surprised of some of the things that are in vaccination as relates to that. And so only thing I've seen as relates to that from personal view is most of the time symptoms arise after a lot of people, gets that. And so I wanted to share that. Other than that, you were asking about certain foods. As it relates to the immune system, we got to look at the immune system as a cross-country race versus a sprint. The immune system is something that builds over time. A lot of times people are thinking as a, short-term basis of taking I can take elderberry and still eat McDonald's and my immune system is going to be okay. It's not how it works. The Eastern way of looking at of health in general, again, from a holistic perspective, is a continuation of good habits and operating on a certain frequency that helps you prevent and also help your body to, cure a lot of the things. So just some simple things. This is actually from a book that I have, and I'll just give you, I had taught a class on it. You can go on my Instagram and see the class that I have, just certain small little things that you can do to continue to boost your immune system. One is, eating a handful of almonds, consuming guava, incorporating yellow bell peppers into your diet, not cooking it to death. A glass of red wine. I would promote not getting just regular wine, but something that's organic and biodynamic, which is free from a lot of preservatives and grown in a certain way that it produces a certain result from the farming aspect of it, and it's not from like genetically modified organisms and or pesticides. Echinacea. Okay, I do recommend certain things like echinacea, elderberry. Another one is garlic. Consuming kale, but consuming kale, not necessarily completely raw. When you consuming kale, you want to make sure that you sprinkle some kind of acidic substance like lime or lemon or oranges, on it to break it down, because it could be counterproductive if not. Shiitake mushrooms, of course, they're away from sugar and processed foods, empty calories. If it does not have nutritional value, stay away from it. Your body's just going to store it as fat, and then you're trying to wonder why you have excess fat. Losing weight, is another one in this book. It talks about just losing weight, making sure that you lose weight. Of course, you got to know how to lose weight in order to do that. Again, trying to relax. Sleep is involved in that. And then the last one is adding some activity, exercise. Okay, making sure that you exercise at least about 3 days a week minimally. If you're very active, I would say about 5 days a week, and having at least a day of rest. And being able to rest. So those are the things that I would, my last
and Garrain, before you jump in there, something that I heard a few times today that I'd like to get some more insight on is, especially, Tory, you just said killing your vegetables. And Dr. Rooke, you mentioned vegetables earlier and how to cook it properly. Can you share some insight on that? Because I know, we get broccoli and we boil it until it's soft and mushy, but is that the right way to eat broccoli? Are we just wasting the broccoli? Can you share some insight on that?
Well, we think we have to, especially collard greens, you think they have to boil it to death. You can actually eat collard greens raw if you chop it up pretty finely, and you can lightly steam. You shouldn't be cooking your vegetables for more than about 5 minutes at most. Lightly steam vegetables. And then you want to maybe put some seasonings on it, but if you don't like raw vegetables, but the best way is actually lightly steamed. And the idea of putting lemon juice, or our chef puts aminos on the kale, but also mirin, garlic, vinegars on them, just as for the acidic. The acid tells to break down the cell wall and it releases the nutrients. Lightly steaming does the same thing, but raw is also good. You just have to chew it properly. And again, at least 5 servings of vegetables a day, and a serving is half a cup. So most of us aren't getting, 98% of Americans aren't getting the recommended amount of vegetables and fruits. So make an effort to do this, because that's how you're going to prevent, actually just general overall health, and then prevent infection.
Yeah.
Sorry, my 98-year-old grandmother will agree with you. She's 98 years old, and she says that the only time she took a flu vaccine is when she got the flu. So I, as a physician, I have to tell you that you have to take the vaccine, and I do believe that, and I have to take it too as an employee. But there are people who agree with you. So, yeah.
Garrain, is there anything you want to touch on or add?
Yeah, I love this conversation. It's less about the food, but more about the food of the mind. I just keep coming back to what you're feeding yourself internally. That's not like physical food. Okay, so when you live in fear, and this is a huge conversation, especially our community. When you are living in fear, that activates the stress hormone. And when that stress, when your embodiment of the frequency that you're living in is based around stress, you are more susceptible to attract anything that does not serve your body's, your soul's purpose in progress and evolving or moving forward. So a lot of times when I hear these conversations around COVID, it's said in a very stressful way. And to the untrained mind, people they hear the words, but it'll unlock something that's deeper inside of them called fear. And any mind that is being controlled by fear, any mind that can be controlled by fear, that is it's like there, you cannot truly make a sound decision. You can't make sound choices under the emotion of stress or fear. They said something crazy like, there's so many people that die on the way to work Monday morning at 7:30 a.m. Why is that? Because they hate the jobs that they work at, and that is activated out of stress. So I think in this conversation, and I just want to preface this, is that when I'll speak from when I'm sharing around COVID, I'm also, I don't believe in balance, but I do believe in harmony. I'm also creating a harmonious spirit of also uplifting the people so that they can receive it in a way that doesn't say, you got to do it now, you got to do it now, you got to, because what it does is it gets even deeper to something that they've probably been fearing since they were 5 years old. And once you activate that pain body, it don't matter what you say, all of a sudden it's susceptible to any dis-ease, which causes disease, anything. It comes so susceptible. And we live in a society that if you were domesticated in fear, you can be controlled by fear. So I think before a lot of these conversations is really diving in and teaching people how to see themselves as a better version of themselves and start loving on themselves, really, and telling themselves different stories on the inside. Because a person who doesn't love themselves, who's eating healthy, they will dilute all the nutrients that their body is taking, because of, just like what Tory was saying earlier, they will like dilute half the things that they're taking because of what they're doing to themselves, or what they're allowing the power of fear to activate inside of them. So I think that this society and us as leaders, and me myself, can up level in the way in which they are languaging these words, using the emotional intelligence, so that people are receiving not only the words, but the energy behind the words in a way that sounds like compassion and love, rather than, if you don't do it now, you're going to die. Because people don't respond. They just don't respond like that. And you can't give a baby pre-calculus. So for me is further educating the way of talking about COVID, and talking about just being in prevention, is just presenting your best self to the world. And how do you do that? One, you stop. You literally just stop. And I hear people say all the time, I'm on lockdown. Like, maybe you needed to be still for a second. And maybe you needed to lose that job that you've been complaining about for the last 10 years. Maybe you needed to, if I just had time, I would write this book. Well, now you got all the time in the world and you still ain't doing nothing. Most people don't know how to be with themselves. So the conversation I just wanted to be out is maybe you needed some time to be still, be with yourself, and actually start loving on yourself and paying attention to your ideas and bringing those to the world. Because the type of person who's living in that big soul quality that's already living inside of you, and you're like living that out, and you're bringing that forth, and you're using those spiritual components, and then you're taking in those foods, 100%. And I don't have the scientific research. I just know the millions of people that I've been in contact with all over the world. The people who use all of the ingredients that's already living inside of them, and then eat those healthy foods, and then taking in all of these healthy things, mind, body, and soul, the life will always find ways to use you on bigger platforms. And the bigger the platform, more people, more message, more results. So like all the experts, they said everything that I would have said, but I just wanted to bring another side of the conversation so that people aren't constantly saying, oh my God, I gotta right now. You're already done for if you're in that mindset.
Yeah. And I take all that, to say, encompass that we all need to find ways to release stress. Stress is definitely, has a major impact on our health. And there are ways for us to release stress during this time, whether, like Dr. Rooke said earlier, taking a deep breath and just letting it out, listening to calming music, prayer, for most, or just daily walks or bike rides. For my anniversary with my wife, I got us bikes and we ride through, our town, just seeing new things and just experiencing life that way, with our son sitting in the back, just taking on the views, or getting out and just walking, around in the neighborhood, because everybody's respecting each other's space. Some people walk in the street, some people go across the street, if they see you coming. But there are ways for us, to relieve some stress. It's very important, especially now, because it's unprecedented times, and get rest. So you guys have been great. This brings us to our last topic, and I'm gonna keep it to one question so we can wrap it up. But keeping our most vulnerable population safe from COVID-19 infections, I think it's something that a lot of people think of. Some people might live with their parents. Some people might be thinking, can my grandparents or my parents, come visit my children? There are a lot of things going through people's minds right now. And Ms. Ealey, I'd like for you to bring us home on that topic. What are some measures that we should be taking as a community to help keep us safe these days? And do you have any advice or specific information you'd like to share on that? You're on mute.
Thank you. So one of the first things I would say is be mindful of your role. We each play individual role and have a responsibility of not just protecting ourselves, but the people around us. We know that there are vulnerable populations, and we know those are the elderly, people who have health conditions. Oftentimes, we may not even know that they have those. And you also have other groups that may not be a part of that vulnerable population, but they also experience or need to have extra precautions. Homeless people, injection drug users, things like people like that, or populations like that we don't often think about, but they are also at risk. So it's important that you be mindful of what you're doing. And as we're trying to get back to normal life, we get it. But you have to also understand we are in a pandemic, and people are being infected because we're not practicing necessary steps that we need to. Simply wearing a mask could change someone's outcome in terms of potentially being exposed and potentially being infected. So it's important to think about your role, and when you're going around people, if we have holidays coming up, we have Thanksgiving coming up. So there are a couple steps that you can take if you know that you're going to have a small gathering with your family. You may want to consider quarantining before. And make sure if you have access to testing, make sure that someone gets tested, not just someone, excuse me, the people who will be present at the Thanksgiving event or what have you are tested. And even afterwards, making sure that you are also being tested after you've been in a space. We have a lot of activities and events where we're trying to get back to normal. And like I said, we have to be mindful as individuals, as businesses, how we can take the necessary steps to protect our loved ones, to protect people who we don't know what their situation is and or what they may be exposed to. There is one thing I just wanted to mention because it was mentioned earlier, and I just want to provide a clarifying point, because one thing COVID has made us more aware of is the social structures that have placed certain groups or more people who are more vulnerable. So one of the things we talked about earlier that was mentioned was Black people are preconditioned. And one of the things we want to keep in mind is your Blackness does not make you more susceptible to COVID alone. What it is the social structures that in place that serve as barriers to make us more vulnerable to things such as not having access to healthcare, having to work, not having the ability to take off days where we don't have to go in, having jobs where you're exposed to people. You drive the bus, you work at the grocery store. So there are social structures and social factors that help to determine our health outcomes. And in most cases, those lead to poor health outcomes. And so all the things we talked about today in terms of making sure you're staying healthy, make sure that you're building your immune system, your mind and your body, all of those play a role. So if you stay in tune with that and you also keep in mind of the things that you need to do, the 3 W's, wear your mask, wash your hands, make sure that you're keeping that 6 feet and or that social distancing, those things will certainly play a role. And be mindful again of our community and the fact that we all play a role in this in terms of not just protecting ourselves, but protecting our community.
Absolutely. And with that, I'd like to, close and thank all of our partners, Atlanta Medical Association, CORE, the BLK+Cross, and the Gathering Spot for hosting this conversation this evening. It was truly amazing. And I was honored to moderate and host this evening. Don't forget to visit aliveandincolor.com for the latest information on COVID convos and how to beat COVID-19 with the truth. Make sure for all registrants, you keep a lookout for a document that's going to be coming to you, a helpful document with all the information that we talked about this evening. Also, next week, make sure to join Alive and in Color for a conversation with V103's own and my brother, Kenny Burns, for a COVID convo on symptoms, diagnosis, and testing. That'll be happening next week. So make sure to visit aliveandincolor.com to be able to get the information for that amazing conversation that'll be taking place next week. I'd like to thank all of our panelists, Jamila, Ealy. You definitely, dropped some jewels, and I want to thank you for that purple rain energy you got going on right now. That was fantastic. Dr. Rooks, I want to thank you for all the information that you shared and the work that you're doing, especially with Morehouse School of Medicine. It's very important, and we thank you for that. I also want to thank Tory Wiley for the jewels you dropped today. And just your open and honesty, for the topics that we talked on. And Mr. Garrain Jones, thank you for your story and your testimony. It was much appreciated. You got an amazing story, and appreciate you opening up and sharing that with us all today. Again, we want to thank our partners for giving the platform, the Gathering Spot, for Gathering Spot, TGS Connect for putting this platform together and managing everything. So thank you all. Have a good night, and make sure to check out the conversations going on next week as well with my brother Kenny Burns. Peace.